Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Thank you, Fiona. Good morning, everyone.
We're just going to give it a couple of minutes as everybody comes online because we start at 7. So in the next minute, feel free to comment, let us know where you're watching from and who you are, what you do. We, as always, love to hear from you. So feel free to comment and let us know. In the meantime, we can just wait it out a little bit. Okay. And also give one of our guests some time to come and join. Okay, he's here.
YouLead Summit 2020 theme was Development is People, Youth at the Center of the Peace and Development Agenda. The summit was brought closer to thousands of delegates through a specially designed virtual summit platform, making it possible for delegates to participate through a hybrid setup that was adopted when the COVID-19 situation limited cross-border travel. With the Regional Summit Center in Arusha, Tanzania, at the East African Community Headquarters, and National Summit Centers in Bujumbura, Kampala, Kigali, Nairobi, and Juba, an even broader online audience was able to participate. Day 1 was dedicated to Youth in Politics, the East Africa Under 40 Political Leaders Forum, reinventing leadership for East African millennials. The summit facilitated a set of intergenerational conversations between young leaders, policymakers, and key national and regional political actors in order to solidify a common purpose, understanding, and solidarity between them. The Nairobi Summit Center played host for Day 1, and key sessions were held simultaneously via live telecasts between the EAC headquarters in Arusha, Nairobi, and Juba, providing for a unique hybrid experience. The highlight of the summit and Day 1 was the acceptance by His Excellency Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete, former President of the United Republic of Tanzania, to become the patron of YouLead. Key outcomes launched the process of developing the East African Youth Governance Architecture Report and the East African Youth Manifesto, the East Africa We Want, broadcasted an intergenerational roundtable dialogue on the leadership for the East Africa We Want, and a roundtable conversation on the leadership for the East African Community We Want to inform the curriculum for the East African Emerging Leaders Fellowship Program. Day 1 also featured the Gender Equality Forum, Young Women Mobilizing Towards Goal 5 of Agenda 2030 and Aspiration 6 of Agenda 2063. Young and senior women gathered virtually and in Arusha for an intergenerational conversation on young women's participation in leadership towards realizing meaningful inclusion of young women in good governance and leadership, to tackle several questions which had been raised and co-created by young women in the region through the leadership of Plan International Kenya. And of course, the icing on the cake on Day 1 was the evening fireside chat with His Excellency Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete, who freely mingled with the young people and shared words of wisdom with the delegates. Day 2 was dedicated to the East African Youth Forum on Peace, Youth at the Center of Peace Building and Conflict Prevention. The forum was dedicated to providing an opportunity for youth to have their voice heard and strengthen their ability to engage in peace and security and contribute towards building an effective, well-coordinated, and responsive youth sector that acts in solidarity within the region. The discussions focused on the vulnerability of youth in conflicts in the region and the role youth can play in peace building, ensuring sustainable security and stability in East Africa. The forum was led by the YouLead Consortium in South Sudan, with sessions at the EAC headquarters, Arusha, Juba, and virtually. The chief guest being Rebecca Garang, Vice President of the Republic of South Sudan. Key interventions proposed in the forum include consolidate an East Africa Youth Network for conflict prevention and peace building, capacity building for young peace builders on reconciliation, mediation, and arbitration, peer-to-peer roundtable conversation for experience sharing on the implementation of peace and conflict resolution mechanisms, peace building advocacy training for youth in the region, and capacity building for youth on implementation of UNSCR 2250. A series of high-value breakout sessions were also held in the afternoon, facilitated by a number of consortium members. Day 3 was dedicated to the East Africa Under 40 Business Leaders Forum, accelerating economic opportunities and decent work for youth, and the East African Youth Enterprise Awards. Introduced in November 2019, the forum has gained traction in the region, especially amongst young CEOs, entrepreneurs, and innovators. The 2020 forum, jointly hosted by Burundi and Rwanda, was composed of well-structured sets of sessions focusing on youth-specific policy and capacity issues, resulting in a set of outcomes that could be taken up by the EAC member states, development partners, and other actors. In addition, the YouLead program piloted its first ever East African Youth Enterprise Awards, recognizing youth-led businesses across the East African community, the partner states which in the current COVID-19 pandemic global context had managed to remain resilient and are simultaneously taking deliberate, innovative actions towards providing decent livelihoods and confronting the most pressing issues of our region, especially those affecting women and youth. Day 4 was dedicated to post-summit agenda development, as well as creating a strong alumni network, the YouLead Action Network, and the agenda of action based on the outcomes of the national level pre-summit events. This resulted in a common regional agenda for action and country-specific interventions. Day 5 was a follow-up of Day 2 and was dedicated to combating violent extremism and promoting safety online, resources for youth-led NGOs. The session was facilitated by Facebook, with panelists and participants joining both virtually and in Arusha, Tanzania. To all our lead partners for 2020, thank you for your continued commitment to YouLead ambitions. Your participation and support have enabled us to meet several of our goals for 2020. We look forward to continued success together with these collaborations as we pursue the post-summit agenda implementation.
Hello, hello, Africa. Welcome to another episode of Unplugged. We are very excited to have you. I see so many of you already about 34 of us. We are excited that you guys really want to have this conversation with us. Feel free to leave a comment. Let us know where you're watching from, what you do. We love to connect with you guys. These comments is actually how we get to know you. It's how we reach out for collaborations. So please leave absolutely everything and we will get back to you. I'll keep shouting you guys out all through the episode. So our guests are online with us, Safina and Onyango. I'm just going to say hi real quick to some of the people in the comments. Hi, Marcy from Kenya. Welcome, Karibuni. Claire, welcome. Geoffrey Julius of ICESA Africa. We are very happy to have you guys. Thank you, everybody. Feel free to let us know where you are, as in represent your region, represent your country. So let's get right into it. I'm going to ask our guests to first introduce themselves before we get right into the conversation. So we can start with Safina. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. On my side, it's nighttime. So yeah, I'm so sorry I can't turn on my camera right now. I'm having a bit of a network issue. But my name is Safina. My name is Safina Kabasinguzi. I am Ugandan. I am a fourth-year student of international relations, concentrating in peace and conflict, and minoring in psychology. And I'm also one of the directors of Frauen Initiative, an organization based in Uganda that works with victims of sexual violence. Nice to meet you. Thank you for, logging in. I can't wait to have this conversation with you guys.
Thanks, Safina. I actually didn't know you were still in university. I'm just here being more amazed by you. Wow. Wow, young people.
Thank you.
Okay, let me give Onyango a minute as well to introduce himself real quick. Go ahead. Okay, I'm not sure if he's still on with us, but maybe we can just move forward as we try to get him. I think maybe, I don't know if it's the connection. Onyango, can you hear us? Can you unmute and introduce yourself? Okay, I'm going to give him, let me give him a minute. Let me give him a minute. I think he will be with us as soon as he can. Some of these things are out of our control. Sometimes the network does not want to cooperate. So we'll just go on. As soon as you're ready, Onyango, you can leave me a message and then we can get to you as well. But yeah, we are going to discuss gender-based violence, which is a topic that is so relevant in so many communities, the world. Okay, it's a very relevant topic that I really wanted us to have time to discuss. This particular series, Activism on the Interweb, is just inspired by the so many people who are online putting out messages that are important and, you know, stirring up these conversations, because we really do learn from them. I think that sometimes people assume, oh, because you're a woman, you must know this and that and that. But no, I mean, a lot of these things we are also learning from online spaces. We are hearing people's stories. We are figuring out what we can do to help. So that's what this conversation is about. You know, let's figure out how we can better our communities, particularly on the issue of gender-based violence. So Safina, when we were talking about this, you raised the issue of language. You know, how are we expressing ourselves when it comes to issues of gender-based violence, and how does that impact our attitudes on it? So I'm not even going to ask a very specific question, but I'd like you to tell us how you feel about, you know, the language we use, whether it's online or in person, and what effect that has on gender-based violence. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Yes, language is usually something that not many people tend to notice. When we talk about gender-based violence, a lot of people think immediately to, oh, you know, the beating, the raping. They never consider the language that we use to be a catalyst to these kinds of things. So from my perspective, and from like, I've read different journals and books, and a lot of people tend to emphasize how we reinforce the patriarchy and misogyny through the language that we use. Like, for example, if you look at how rape alone is reported, especially in Uganda, the headlines desensitize and they sometimes even romanticize sexual violence. You know, there's a way they write these stories. I think once it was a headline, I think in Nigeria, some part of Western Africa, some years back, that went something like, girl kills husband after he tries to have sex with her, you know, and the story is about a child bride, a young, I think she was 11 or 12 at that time. So when they write the headline like this, they sort of, you know, they don't give us the depth of the story. They don't let people understand. So a lot of people brush over it and not truly understand how, you know, what more to this story is there. But if you say something like child bride is, you know, kills a man that was trying to rape her, or, you know, kills a rapist, you know, that sort of gives people a clearer picture on what's going on and what happened. So the language sort of tries to spare us the brutality, and yet when men do these things, when a perpetrator hits a woman, or when he rapes her, or, you know, when there's gender-based violence in the community, usually the perpetrator never spares any, they never spare them any brutality. So we should not use language around these cases in a sense that is trying to protect the. Somebody saying they can't hear me. Can you guys hear me? Someone is saying no sound.
Let me see. That's odd. I can hear you. Can you guys not hear Safina? Can you guys hear us?
Okay. Yes, we can hear.
That might be an issue on Moses's end specifically. Moses, you might want to either exit and come back, or yeah, maybe check out the network, but the rest of us can hear you. So Safina, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so in a lot of times, even when we talk about rape, I can't even say that I am innocent from this. You know, we all take part in this, because it's how we have been brought up. You know, it's how the culture and society talks about these cases. So even when we personally talk about rape, domestic violence, we never tend to center the perpetrator of these acts, you know. Yeah. You'll notice, like, even when we talk about violence against women, we usually say violence against women. We never front the person that's committing this violence. We never say male violence against women, you know. So it's sort of, it keeps the perpetrators in the shadows, you know. It does, and yet they're the ones who we should be fronting. Even with the headlines, we'll find headlines that in Ugandan media has been guilty of this over and over again. They write headlines like 8,000 girls have fallen pregnant, you know? It's like, what do you mean fallen pregnant? These are girls, these are children. And because of that language, you'll find people under the comments saying things like, oh, you see, girls nowadays, parents should be better. You know, there is no one that is actually pointing a finger at the actual rapist, the actual perpetrator, the actual problem in society, the person that is, you know, causing these issues. There's no one that does that because of how the story is written out there. The story never focuses on who are the rapists. Are they in jail right now? It never does that. It's always telling, even when you read the article, you find people from the government being quoted saying, oh, you know, parents need to do better. You can't parent your child out of, you know, out of violence. You can't dress a woman out of violence. So with the language that we use, we're sort of enabling this behavior because we don't want to point out who is doing these things. Even when you look at like the term, I hate the term defilement. Personally, I work with victims of rape, and I hate the term defile. When someone says, was she defiled? I really, really hate the term, because when you look it up, the term to defile it's defined as making something dirty, making something filthy, you know, spoiling something. And if you work with rape victims, or if you interact with them, there is, because of the purity culture that we have in society, there is a way when a woman is raped or when a boy is raped, they tend to feel dirty, you know. It's like I've been violated, I've been and that's because of also the language that we use when we talk about these cases. When you say defile, then you have, because of the purity culture, then you have things like honor killings. Honor killings exist because the family feels like, my little girl was raped, but they say she was defiled, which means she's dirty. She does not meet the criteria for, you know, purity culture. So then she ends up being killed to protect, quote unquote, the honor of the family. You know, things like this. It gives the rapist so much power, and it's psychologically damaging the victims of violence. Then we also have, when we look at language, there is also, when we, like, if you look at the language, when we're discussing sex workers, you know, there is one time I talked about, I posted, I sent out a tweet about how the sex work industry is very dangerous and how sex workers face so much violence. And under that tweet, there were so many men that were saying, you know, let them get another job, or, you know, but she chose this, you know, let her find something else. She knew what she was getting into. And that's when it actually hit me. Like all these years, that's when it hit me that the language that we're using around sex work is very dangerous, because a lot of times we always tend to say choice, you know, we throw around the word choice. We say, yeah, it's her choice. And we stop the conversation there. We never go in depth. We never try to explore the reasons behind these choices she's making. You know, we never look at the economic and social coercion behind this choice. We always just say it's her choice. And when we say it's her choice, when something bad happens, you have, because a lot of people don't tend to critically think, they just put words out there. So when you say it's her choice, she knew what she was getting into, she should have known better. If she's scared of getting raped, let her get another job, stuff like that. It sort of implies that she's choosing this kind of lifestyle because she has other choices, but she's making this one as a free choice. And that's not true. If you look at a lot of sex workers, they've been coerced by socio-economic conditions, they've been trafficked, some are victims of grooming from when they were kids, you know. So we need to also explore and sort of shift the language to explore how we are continuously victimizing these women. Because if you say let her get another job, you're missing out on the fact that, like, if we look at Uganda as a case study, there was a sex worker that I was working with a few months back, and she has about, I think, 7 kids, and she didn't want to do this. You know, she never wanted to be a sex worker. It's very dangerous. She feels like it's very dangerous and she wants to get out. But because she wasn't given an education when she was a young girl, she wasn't given an education when she was a younger girl, she sort of had no, you know, like she had no choice but to enter into the system, because it's either you starve or you enter sex work. So I'll just like summarize quoting Fatima Bhutto. She said, any choice that has gender implications was an option that was the only option. So like I said before, it's either you starve or you. go into this work. So we should always explore like the language that we use, and the throwing around the word choice, defilement, things like that could be very, very dangerous. Yeah, thank you. That's all I have to say.
I think that's something that a lot of us most likely haven't thought about that critically. I know that even for me, until I saw these conversations that were happening on Twitter, and you were part of these conversations, I thought, oh, wow, there is a very specific way that we are talking about things that is enabling wrong attitudes towards gender-based violence and towards the victims of gender-based violence. I mean, even just that, the word defile, to make dirty. I don't think I'd ever really like thought about it like that, but I can imagine just even the psychological effect that has on someone who has been abused and what that does to your mental health. And I think it's a great lesson that we are all learning on how we should be talking about these things, how to stop and think about, the way you're going to address something before you say it. I see that Otieno is now with us, so let me give him a minute to introduce himself. Please go ahead.
Right. Good evening, Fiona and everybody else. I hope I'm audible and I'm visible enough.
Yes.
Yes. It's evening in Nairobi, Kenya. I can see people are from different places here. My name is Onyango Otieno. I am a writer, I'm a poet, I'm a social justice activist. I am a mental health advocate and an Afro masculinity activist as well. I podcast on African masculinity, just interrogating the complexities of African masculinities. And I also operate a safe space for sexually abused boys and men, and currently supporting 16 men through therapy in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to ask, like, real quickly, what does Afro masculinity activist mean? Like, I see that term in your bio, but I don't know what it exactly means. Maybe you can just let us know real quick.
Well, I am definitely into the affairs of the African man. What informs his identity, what informs his politics, what informs how he perceives himself, and how this information roots how he behaves in society, how he feels about himself, and how this also affects the people around him. This is fellow men and children and women and gender non-conforming persons.
Okay. All right. I think that's something we all wanted to know. So thank you for telling us that. So let me get into what we were just discussing now. We're talking about the language that surrounds the topic of gender-based violence and how that impacts the victims, how that really steers our attitudes towards it. So maybe you can just share with us your thoughts on how we are talking about these issues and what effect that has.
Right. I think I really want to first appreciate the in-depth analysis that Safina is just from issuing in regards to the same. And I think I would pretty much summarize just what she said to the fact that, the language we are using here as English is not our primary language, the people who are here for most of us. This is language that we were taught. It's not our indigenous ways of expressing ourselves. And so even as we were growing up, we tended to accept words that we already found existing that we were told were meant to mean certain things. And we didn't get to question the roots of these words. Like, for example, now like defilement, we don't get to think about the etymology, like what the root of the word is. So because we heard before, it was said that when you're raping a child, then we call it defilement. Nobody starts to question, but where is this really coming from, right? And so many perpetrators would get absolved or distanced from being the subject matter. And so we lay more focus on the survivor or the person who's been harmed by these acts of violence. And even in the reporting itself, when we talk about how a woman or a man was raped, we don't say it was a man who did it or it was a woman who did it. We make the survivor the central subject matter of the conversation. And so already the person who did the harm is distanced from the conversation, right? And so again, because there is so much victim blaming, there is so much victim shaming, already we have a very nervous relationship with violence as Black people generally, systematically, politically, economically, socially. And even today I was having a conversation with some journalists in Kenya, and we were just talking about how like mental health reporting is like, how people talk about mental health and journalists write and report about mental health. And I was making a point that generally how we are very poor with how we report violence. Also because perhaps as Black people, the way our stories have been told, it's almost like we dehumanize ourselves, maybe because we've been dehumanized before and almost accepted that as a way of seeing ourselves. The way it's almost very easy to show Black bodies when something bad has happened somewhere and people died, you don't get to see white people's bodies in these kind of instances. So even when we are communicating information around gender-based violence, sometimes we even show images of how somebody has been hurt by their partner. And these are very invasive kind of images, or sometimes even like the information we give puts the person who's been harmed at a point of very uncomfortable focus. So definitely, I think one of the missing things in our communication around gender-based violence is just the approach of information and lack of empathy. We do not humanize the people who get harmed when we are talking about gender-based violence, and this again perpetuates the victim shaming that has already been going on for a very long time.
All right, thank you for that. I see that you and Safina, really pointed out just that empathy part of things, and it's true. It really is something that we sort of leave out. We talk about these things, and it's sort of like they're almost removed from real life experiences. Like it isn't real people that are going through them, and that distance. When you said we distance the perpetrators from the actual incident, I mean, it's one of those things. It's like, you don't see it until you see it. Like now that you're speaking about it, it's like, wow, that's actually how we are reporting it in the media. And I mean, I think it's a huge thing for, whoever is on here and you're in the media, it's something to really like focus on. How are we telling these stories? Are we being empathetic? Are we, making the perpetrators just like, other? And then it's all the victim, and all the things they've been through. So thank you for bringing that out. I feel like language is a huge thing that we are really learning today. And gosh, there's so many messages to go through. Let me just welcome some of you. Thank you. I see Mozambique is represented. Hi, Mary, you are welcome. Quinta from Kenya, welcome. Hajim Kema. Akol Esther says, I'm interested in the mental health aspect. Would love to share more with Onyango. His handles are reflected on our social. So if you'd like to reach out to him, you can reach out to him there. Or if you have something specific you'd like to ask, feel free to leave it here. And if we have some time, we'll get into it. Hi, Denaya. Okay, there's so many messages, but thank you so much, guys, for joining us. I'm going to try and get back to most of you at least. But it's really nice to see people from all over the continent taking part in this conversation. So one other thing I want to talk about is laws. We have such, like when you look at them, we have such solid laws, when it comes to gender-based violence. And all sorts of sexual harassment and, all that type of violence. We have such solid looking laws. We have, if you go online, you'll see that, oh, Uganda has one of the, the best laws in this, and, and we have all these laws, but, what's on the ground is very different. It doesn't reflect all these very shiny laws that we have. So let me ask you, Safina, laws aside, because they're important, but if what's actually in society is very different, what do you feel like we could be doing better, or what should we be doing better to just make our spaces more safe, make them safer for children, for adults, for people to exist?
Well, society does run on laws, so I wouldn't think of divorcing ourselves from the law. But I would like to start by pointing out that the laws that we have under the laws that we have and the laws that are created under a patriarchal system for women will always be conditional, and they can be taken away at any time. They can be changed at any time because of the patriarchal system. And when I say changed, I mean changed in the sense that will harm women, like look at Afghanistan. Overnight, the women couldn't study anymore. So the first point of action would honestly be to but to dismantle the patriarchy, because all the laws that are created under it will never really have the woman's the victim's best point in interest. And also, when we're trying to understand violence against women or violence in general, gender-based violence, we need to consistently look at how the law works and not what it says. Because yes, we do have a lot of like shiny laws, and these are drafted by experts, and they publish it in the news on the websites. But do these laws actually stop violence against women, or do they just establish conditions under which the violence against women is condoned? So like look at Uganda, for example. Rape is illegal as per the law, right? Everyone knows that it's illegal to rape. However, because the marital rape has not been criminalized yet, it is okay to rape your wife. Nothing will happen, it's not illegal. They say rape is illegal, but then if she's your wife, nothing is going to happen because you guys are married. So that's how the law works. You have to look at how it establishes different conditions under which women, where it's okay to do this to a woman and when it's not okay. Also, if you look at the sexual harassment is also illegal. But for some reason, if you look at the Mwesije Samantha case, the guy that she reported for sexually harassing her over and over again has gotten a promotion, in the same exact legal system that we women are supposed to turn to for justice, So it's not really about what the law says, it's about what it does, how it acts. And also laws prohibit violent acts of violence, but how often do you actually see the police stepping in when a husband is beating his wife? They tend to shy away and be like, oh, you see, that's they call it, those are home affairs, bedroom affairs, we should stay out of it. In my experience with the different cases of violence against women, the police will try to convince you to settle it outside court. You go report that so-and-so has raped me, so-and-so has beaten me. They'll tell you, you know what, he's rich, you're going to ruin his future, pay off this much money and it will be okay. Forgive him, he's your boyfriend, he's your husband, stuff like that. Other times they might even try to broker a marriage. There was a case where they tried to, he's your boyfriend, you guys will just get married and things will be okay. Other times they try to frustrate you and even release the perpetrator. There was a young girl, I think in S2, Form 2, and she was going back home. I think this was in Mbale or something earlier this year. And on her way home, a guy tried to rape her. And she fought back and he cut off her hand. This is a young girl. They went to the police, they went to the courts, and the guy was released after 2 days. The court tried to frustrate them, asking for money, give us money for fuel, give us money for this, give us money for that. And yet this country pays taxes, So, and the law says she has a right to justice. The law says, but that's not what it's doing. So in my opinion, since we can't really divorce ourselves from the law and we need it to function properly, I would advise on fighting the patriarchy and fighting to have the laws enforced. Because there was a study, I read an experimental program that it was done in the US, and it showed that and the immediate arrest and conviction would have serious impacts on fighting gender-based violence. Like if the perpetrators know, I'm going to get arrested, I'm going to go to jail, I'm going to face serious consequences, there will always be that fear of you're not committing it. So this could help us reduce gender-based violence cases. Actually, another example that's just come to mind is Nigerian men yesterday on Twitter were giving themselves tips. We're giving other men tips on who are living in Africa for developed countries, and they were saying things like, when you go abroad, when you go to America, there no means no. And it's sort of like, what do you mean in America no means no? So what does no mean here in Africa? What does it mean here? So if you so much, and they were saying that if you so much as touch a woman without her consent, you'll die in jail. So don't do it. You know, so it's a clear sign, like you know what you're doing, you know exactly what you're doing. And if the laws are enforced and if there are clear-cut consequences for these things and they don't see other assaulters getting, of course, in America and developed countries, it's not the best because we still have rapists getting away. But in comparison to African countries, it's better enforced. So if we push for the enforcement of laws, then we have, we have more, we will have more women getting justice, and we'll have less men be willing to, be violent. We'll have less men getting involved in gender-based violence. To conclude, I will quote Simone de Beauvoir. She said, never forget that it only takes one political, economic, or religious crisis for women's rights to be put in jeopardy. Those rights are never to be taken for granted, and you must remain vigilant throughout your entire life. That shows that under the system of patriarchy, at any given moment, just one small thing, and overnight, even the little progress that we have is gone. So we have to remain vigilant. We have to continue putting a lot of effort on the enforcement of these laws and trying to protect more women in society. Yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Safina. Gosh, you touched so many important things. I don't even know where to start, but I mean, it's true, like you said, that we cannot divorce ourselves from the laws. Law is necessary, but just you talking about that we need to speak up, speak up for enforcement, because again, the laws are only so much, they only contribute so much if enforcement is so, it's literally what, bare minimum, if not less. And I see Christian in the comments said, why does GBV seem to cover only women and leave men outside? And I think that that's a good segue for us to move into what we wanted to talk about next, why gender-based violence is not an issue of one sex or the other, or one group or the other, why it's something we should all care about. But we're going to get into that after our trivia session. Okay, we always do a little bit of trivia. If you haven't been here before, this is what we do. So we're going to get into a couple of trivia questions. Feel free to raise your hand if you know the answer, and then just come and give us the answer. So we're going to switch to that screen in a bit. And then anyone can answer, whether it's the guests or the audience. Feel free to join in. So let's get into that. Switch the screen real quick. Okay, so the first question is, who was the famous environmentalist and first woman from East and Central Africa to attain a doctorate and awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004? Who is that famous environmentalist? Anybody?
Wangari Maathai.
There you go. Was that Chris? Who was that?
Rogers.
Rogers. Thank you so much. Thank you. There you go, Wangari Maathai. Easily one of the most famous East African women. So the second question is, there is an island nation between Madagascar and the African mainland. Which is it? Where are my geography people? Christian, your hand is up. Do you want to answer? Does anybody know what country this is? Lillian? Go ahead, Lillian. Anybody in the comments? Lillian, you can go ahead.
Seychelles.
Pardon?
Seychelles.
Sorry, no, that's not the answer we're looking for. It's another one, but it was a good try. Heaven, I see Heaven Carter. Do you want to try? No, guys, it's not Mauritius. I see Mauritius from Linda.
Morocco?
No. Oh, someone got the answer in the comments.
No, I want to try.
Okay, Ahmedi said it first in the comments. Actually, it's Comoros. but I see two other people said the same thing. So yes, the island nation of Comoros. So now you guys, we're all a little bit smarter today because I didn't know that either. I did not until we were researching this for the episode. Okay, this one is for my fashion people who like fancy things. So which the luxury brand Porsche has a very famous logo. Which animal features on their logo? I think it's pronounced Porsche. I'm not really sure. Is it Porsche? Yes, the luxury car brand. Which animal features on their logo? Anyone? This is an easy one. Guys, I don't know this one. All you Formula One guys, it's a horse. Thank you, Shilda. That is correct. All right, so we're going to get back into our discussion. That was just a quick, let's learn something random, okay? Something random. So let's get back to the conversation. So we were just talking about something that Christian had raised about, how this is an issue that's not only about women, but is about all over us. So I'm going to invite Otieno to say something about this, because you find that in even just in our conversations on social media, it's women who tend to talk about this, who tend to push for these conversations. And I feel like that creates, I mean, to be fair, when it comes to statistics, in a lot of places, women do suffer gender-based violence more than men. However, the fact on the ground is that all people suffer from it in one way or another. So the question is, why should we all be caring about this? Why should it be a conversation that not just women are having? Or why should it be a conversation that, is that we pay attention to and acknowledge that not just women are suffering as a result? So I'll just let you go ahead and say something about that, Otieno.
Thank you, Kemigisha. In fact, the Ministry of Health of Kenya reported that last year in 2020, between mid-March and June, there were 5,000 rape cases reported. And of the number, 70% of that number, the survivors were girls of 18 years of age and below. And that 5% of the 5,000 of the reported numbers were boys and men who had been violated, and that 95% of the perpetrators were men, and that 5,000 number was a 7% increase from what was reported in the same period in 2019. Now, the Ministry of Health of Uganda reported that on the same period between March and June thereabout, the number was 6,000 rape cases. And again, staggering statistics show that men are more than 90% of the perpetrators. We often shy away from talking about it from the numbers because it's easy to complain, oh, but boys have been neglected. Why can't also men be brought into the conversation and all that? And I want to explain it this way. And I'm picking it up from something Safina said about how we can't dissociate from the law. Society runs on laws, and that's a very important statement. Now, I again tell people, with our context, the context of the world, the context of many countries in Africa, when we talk of society, we are talking about the mannerisms in which people behave. That's what makes up a society, not just people. It's also their ideas, it's also their cultures, how they see themselves and how they see each other. And the people who direct how society behaves are the people in power. They are the ones who come up with ideas, behaviors, and mannerisms of which people in society behave. Now, our societies are hugely patriarchal. So many times when we are talking about society, we're actually talking about behaviors, ideas, cultures that center men. And the ideas of men being at the forefront of leadership, the forefront of power, the forefront of sex, and all these pillars of society, forefront of education everywhere, forefront of governance everywhere, forefront of religion as well. Very important to note. So I think we need to keep trickling down the meaning of society, even as we issue statements like society this, society that. It's the people in power, and most times who are the people overly represented when we talk about power? It's men who are overly represented. And so if we are the people in power, then the laws that we shall create definitely many times will favor us in very many ways. We will look for laws, ideas, cultures, and many other mannerisms that center us, which, you know, the English call it phallocentrism, you know, like you put men's wants at the center of every conversation, right? And so as a result, the way our laws are framed, it's almost like, yeah, this is a man's world. Yeah, he can get away with so many things. But now, how is that counteractive to the men themselves, especially men who are not in power the way their older counterparts who have the wealth do, right? You find that the same laws and the way they're choreographed makes it also very difficult for boys and men who've been abused to come out and say that, yo, I was harmed by so and so, and especially if it was a woman and it was their partner, they can't say it. Why? Because we are already idealized as perpetrators. That's the first thing. And so it's become very difficult for all of us to think or perceive that this person who we have idealized as a perpetrator can also be a victim of the same violence we talk about. Yeah, again, because of what the numbers say, and again, because of our ideas of masculinity. So this man must always be strong. This man must always have it all together. This man must have all knowledge. And you know, when we talk about the role of men in the home, we talk about provision, we talk about priesthood, we talk about leadership, right? And so if from such a young age, all of us think of a man in that one particular way, he ceases to exist in these other forms of existence. And therefore we end up dehumanizing him. So he does not have proper structures to report when he's the one on the receiving end. And so for the longest time, in fact, it's the women through feminism who have been rising to say, you know what, you people are harming us. We can't keep on living like this. We also want to own land. In fact, it will surprise you that in Kenya, only 1% of women own land, only 1%. We are about 50 million people here. And again, why? Because the system of land ownership has been very patriarchal, even how inheritance has been happening for the longest time. It's like son to son to son to son to son, right? And that's how, because, you know, traditionally land was ancestral, and it's the men who are receiving land from their fathers, and because women were being married off to other men's villages, right? And so these attitudes are the things we need to start rethinking, because they're also working against us men, because right now it's very hard. Like I think Safina mentioned it, like when you go to, like when a guy goes to or I don't know where I was having that conversation, like when a guy goes to a police station to report that he's been violated by either another man or been violated, especially when he's been violated by his female partner, the police laugh at you first of all, right? And because you're in a relationship, it's the same thing you're also told. How does a man get beaten up by a woman? What do you mean? How can you not defend yourself, right? And so men actually fear other men, because men constantly want to be accepted and honored amongst other men, because when that happens, it's automatic that they will be honored by women, because women are perceived to be lower in caste or class than men generally. And the other thing that is important to tell is that even oppressed men oppress women, right? That's very important for us to understand. And I would encourage all of us here to go and read the works of this guy, this Ivory Coast leader whose name I forget. His name is leaving me. The founder of Ivory Coast, what was his name again? Do you remember?
I'm hoping that someone is going to come up in the comments and save the day.
Yeah, his name is just escaping me, but he was a leader of Ivory Coast from, I think, around 1984 to 1987 when he was assassinated. I forget his name. His name is here. He's just gone. Because he was on the forefront of advocating for women's rights at a time when it was almost unheard of in the whole world, leave alone in that. Thomas Sankara. Yes, thank you, Safina. And for me, reading his works, like his words and the way he created systems and programs. And I remember, in fact, in 1987, during International Women's Day, he said that today it's the men who are going to the market. In fact, we do have videos that show that, you know, men are going to the market and they didn't even know the price of onions. They didn't know the price of tomatoes. They didn't know just how to manage their household in a nutshell, right? And so again, in as much as we might think that the idea of men being on top is good because it keeps us safe, we look like we are on top, we are not taught to deal with our emotions, and we are idealized as people who are supposed to always be strong, you know. When we are the people who've been violated and being harmed, and which happens a lot, then it becomes very hard to come up. And so the answer to the question about why we focus more on women, it's time men came together and also started taking care of each other the way women have been taking care of one another. We can't keep depending on women to be the ones taking care of us just because they are quote unquote motherly, as the way they've been socialized to be. You know, just by the simple fact that we are all human beings, we all have the capability to show care. It is not a gender issue. It is not a sex issue. In fact, all these gender roles are just ideas that have been put upon us just because of the fact we belong to one sex or another. So it's high time the Ahmadis of this world, the Heaven Carters of this world, the Moses Semuayos of this world, to come out and say, boys are going through a hard time and their fathers are not at home to be their role models. Their role models are on TV murdering people. Their role models are in government being corrupt, and they are corrupt, and they are very impunitive because there are no consequences to this corruption. Their role models are in their neighborhoods raping young girls, raping young boys, raping women every single day in their marriages, in their relationships, and in their neighborhoods. And there are no consequences. So definitely, I as a 5, 6, 8, 10-year-old boy, I'm going to learn from my society more than what I'll be told about morals. I will be learning from the actions of the adults around me. And because boys, we definitely look up to our fathers because of that sense of identity and belonging. If we do not have correctly mannered men around us, then it's going to be very difficult to imagine a world where boys can even feel safe to reach out in society for help. So just as Safina was saying, dismantle the patriarchy. What does that mean in everyday life, in our homes, in our places of worship, in our places of work? Can we start thinking of men, women, gender non-conforming persons as human beings who all deserve care, who all deserve love, who all deserve space of leadership, who all deserve proper governance and access to sexual and reproductive health and rights, and access to education, access to all basic rights? Yes.
Wow, thank you so much for that. I'm hoping that everyone was getting every single word, because I think you shared some really important things. And I really appreciate the different angles from which you have discussed that. I think one of the things that really stood out for me is the fact that we see men in a certain way, and so they cease to exist in other ways. And I think that that's definitely a big thing. As regards all of this violence, that if men are put in a position where, it's like all consuming, the power, the this, the that, it's like, where does it end? Where do we draw lines? Where do we, So I appreciate how you discussed that. And just getting back to just activism on the interweb. Yes, guys, don't say that I'm using wrong English. We're calling it the interweb because that's like a fun little term we're using on Twitter. But yeah, I feel like the internet, specifically on Twitter, has opened up such great space for us to talk about these things openly, to disagree, to agree, even if we need to fight it out a little bit and learn. I think just created a great space for that. And Safina, I know that Frauen initiative was born on the internet. So I'd like you to just tell us a little bit about your work with Frauen and why the online space is actually a good thing, a good tool that we can utilize in fighting gender-based violence.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Yes, as Fiona mentioned, Frauen Initiative Uganda started online. It started on Twitter. It was during this period when we were sort of having a Me Too moment on Ugandan Twitter, and people were talking about how they were telling their stories around sexual violence, and they were pointing out who the perpetrators were. So we saw so many stories flooding in, and there didn't seem to be any justice, no consequences, no therapy for these women, no one to, come and hold their hand and support them and everything. So what we did was, someone put out a tweet. It was Mari at that time. She put out a tweet and she's like, is there something else we can do? We can't just come here year in, year out, just talking about it and just saying, okay, so-and-so has done this, so-and-so has done that, because the law is not going to enforce itself. It needs someone there that's pushing it. It needs someone to stand up for these victims when they can't stand up for themselves and advocate. So we sort of came together as a collective of women, and we started this. Okay, it started as Fem Power, but then when we're registering it, we changed the name to Frauen Initiative Uganda, and it has been working for about a year, and all our services have been online. And that's where the importance of activism online comes in, because because of the pandemic, we have not been able to go down to the communities and talk and everything. So all the work that we do, the crowdsourcing for donations, the educative talks we have every 2 weeks, the teaching lessons, and even the victims that reach out to us, they reach out to us because they see the work that we do online. Even with me personally, I have different women that come seeking help outside sexual violence. There'll be domestic violence, there'll be bullying, there'll be this, there'll be reproductive health, things like that. So we need more people. And for developing, I will specify Uganda because it's the one I'm used to. If you look at the Ugandan system, things like sex ed, they're not taught properly. One time I was having a conversation on reproductive health, and a lot of women didn't know that the morning after pill does not work if you're already ovulating. And these are grown women. So if we have these conversations, we equip as many women as we can, because of course a huge population of Ugandan women can't access the internet, but those who can be equipped with this information. The men online with toxic masculinity, the men who don't understand that when they were young, when so and so was touching them like this, that was sexual violence, because a lot of sexual violence towards men is glorified. If a young boy comes out, if a man comes out and he says, I was raped when I was 14, or he won't say I was raped, he will say my babysitter or my auntie who was 30 or 20 at that time, she used to touch me like this and touch me like that. He will get glorified. They'll be like, oh, you're pulling in the big league, what, things like that. And he doesn't understand that was actually sexual violence, and there's a lot of trauma to unpack. So when we have these conversations online, we encourage the masses, we sort of tell people that, yes, we're here for them, you're not alone. And that's how the organization started. That's how it carries out a lot of its work. Even with one of the cases we worked on when we had just started, it was a young girl that had been raped and kidnapped by a military official, a security official in Uganda. And the only reason as to why we were able, honestly, the reason I feel we were able to get her back, because at that time we were a very small organization, not many, we didn't even have funding. And the only reason we were able to fight for her and get her back and have the police investigate and bring her back home to her parents was because we used the social media. We created a hashtag and we pushed it every day, every single day. We pushed a hashtag. And because it started to pick up, you know, government officials were being tagged on the posts and everything. So someone from Minister of Gender reached out and she asked for the case, and she was able to help us to get this to get this young girl back to her family. It took us about 50 days or so, but we were able to bring her back to her family. And we would, like, you know, girls go missing all the time, so we would have never known what would have happened to her. So it's very important to use. A lot of times many people think just coming on, they say keyboard warriors, yeah, they think it's just, you're just talking, but even just that talking can do a lot. It can educate someone, it could save someone, it could you know, it could help equip people with different things that they didn't know about. It could, one time when we're having a conversation about coercion when it comes to rape, a lot of girls in uni didn't know that when, you know, when there's a factor of authority, or when there is, you know, when someone keeps on telling you, oh, please, 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 you know, when they try to coerce you, just because it's not violent, they don't tend to realize that that is part of sexual violence, that is rape. But because society has painted this picture of a perfect victim, and there is no one out there to properly teach us when we're young kids that this is what happens, this is what it looks like. We have a lot of girls and boys growing up into adults, and they don't know what is right and what is wrong. You know, they don't know that someone is not supposed to do this to me. They don't know someone was not supposed to do this to me when I was a child. So it's very important, even if you don't have an organization, even if you have 300 followers, it's important to get the message out there. As long as you can get the message out there, you can start conversations. The little people that you can equip with this knowledge, that you can equip with this strength, people who you can tell that you're there for them. As long as you just do that and put it out there, that's enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Safina. Seeing your work, the work that Frauen Initiative has been doing on Twitter is just, I mean, even just like the crowdfunding, you've been able to raise money for so many different causes. And I think like it's like faith in humanity restored. The internet is one of those double-edged swords that has a lot of negativity, but also so much positive stuff we could do with it. So it's amazing to see young people taking up space and doing positive things with the internet. So Onyango, I also want to ask you about your work. I know that you're a trauma coach as well, and maybe you can just tell us a little bit about how the huge platform that you built on Twitter has been a moving force in fighting gender-based violence.
Right. I've been telling personal stories online since around 2011, and Twitter was very, very young in Africa those days. And we were just like among the first activists, the first bloggers to, express ourselves in the blogosphere. It wasn't very popular, but it offered us an alternative access to the monopoly of traditional media that existed there before. And even like, it's really interesting how these days, to some extent, even social media almost directs how mainstream media operates as well, because more voices are starting to get represented. Because you can imagine if you are a person who identifies as an LGBTQ member, it's very hard to be visible in mainstream media because of, again, the gatekeepers who are there, the people who represent power there. You might not see your face there as much, but social media has given us the space to tell our stories in a way that we own them. You know, it's not mainstream media in a newspaper, somebody saying, oh, so edit this out, edit that out. I have the power to say my story exactly as it is. And so over the years, I mean, I have amassed, you know, a huge following just centered on the kind of stories I tell. And I think one of the things that has made me unique is just the fact that I'm an African man who is expressive about his emotions and expressive about the many upheavals that go on in our homes that we are often afraid to talk about. In late 2019, I mean, I've been talking about, I'm being a mental health advocate. I've been talking about mental health and its understandings and trauma for the longest time since 2017 when I began this advocacy work. But in late 2019, I also opened up to the public, and I first started with a tweet coming out to say that I was also raped when I was 20 years old, and it happened. I witnessed that, or I underwent that from our house manager, or who we, you know, people who we understand as house helps here. And there was a huge uproar on Twitter, like it was insane, you know, because again, the perceptions of masculinity that we've just been talking about here, we don't think that a man can be raped. We don't think a man can be violated in that sense. And in as much as I did appreciate the amount of support I received and encouragement I received from both men and women who were very empathetic and supportive of me coming out like that, I also underwent a lot of cyberbullying just from the fact that I was saying what I was saying, because I mean, there were, and 98% of the people bullying me were fellow men, and they were ridiculing me, and they were saying things like, oh, there was no way, you know, a man can be raped by a woman. You must just be chasing clout, that you must have enjoyed it. I wish I could also submit myself to be raped by a woman right now. You know, just many derogatory things that people would say, very harsh things that people would say to you. But what touched me most is, again, the number of men who came to my DMs, direct messages, saying things, yo, brother, I really identify with what you've said because it also happened to me. And these people can't talk about that in public because of the stigma associated with rape against men. And they told me things like, I'm struggling with intimacy in my marriage because of the trauma I've lived with since I was 18 years old, 19 years old, 12 years old. It was my older cousin. It was an uncle of mine who violated me. It was the man who everybody trusted in the neighborhood, and I've never been able to talk about this. And I received so many hurtful, horrifying stories from men who are living with the pain of the silence because of the society around them, you know? So it prompted me to begin the safe space and even started fundraising for them, because it's been very difficult for men to come out. And so social media has really helped me disseminate my message to the world. And, you know, recently the BBC did my story and it went all over the world. And I received, again, many messages from men all over the world, particularly what in many quarters is known as the Global South. This is South America, Africa, and even other places in Europe and the Americas. We have men living in turmoil because they're afraid of speaking up about what happened to them, you know, in the hands of their caregivers, in the hands of people who are managed with taking care of them. So I really utilize the power of social media because it's made me tell my story to the world.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Gosh, there's nothing I can even add. I feel like we have all taken a little something from this conversation today, whether it's the fact that patriarchy is real, okay? It doesn't matter how, you know, how people talk on the internet and try to make it seem like these are not real things. The patriarchy is real. We should all be doing our part to steer away from that narrative, to create a space where both men and women are safe, okay? Where we can have conversations where we are not I mean, it's not men against men or men against women or any of that, where we're just creating safer spaces for our children and for all of us as a whole. Thank you so much, Safina and Otieno, for sharing with us. Guys, we are at the end of our time. I see some hands up, and I'm so sorry that we can't have all you guys contribute, but we will continue the conversation online. So please join us on our Twitter. We'll continue a little bit of the conversation there. But thank you so much for coming on board and joining us in the comments and just really sharing with us your thoughts. Please do go and support Otieno and Safina online. They are doing some really amazing work to make our spaces safer, our spaces online, our spaces in real life. And yeah, they need your support. Be there, even if it's just your voice, even if you're there to say, yeah, me too, I agree, go and be part of these conversations, because it's really a thing that we can't do, in little groups. Let's do it for absolutely everybody. Safina has left the link for Frauen, the handle for Frauen, so please go ahead and follow them. They're doing amazing work to help victims of gender-based violence. Follow Otieno on @RicksPoet, I believe, and just go to our page. Actually, you'll find all these handles. Thank you again, guys. Have a fantastic week, and we will see you next time. Thank you to our guests for your time, for sharing so passionately about what you do. We appreciate you. Take care, everybody, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
YouLead Summit 2020 theme was Development is People, Youth at the Center of the Peace and Development Agenda. The summit was brought closer to thousands of delegates through a specially designed virtual summit platform, making it possible for delegates to participate through a hybrid setup that was adopted when the COVID-19 situation limited cross-border travel. With the Regional Summit Center in Arusha, Tanzania, at the East African Community Headquarters, and National Summit Centers in Bujumbura, Kampala, Kigali, Nairobi, and Juba, an even broader online audience was able to participate. Day 1 was dedicated to Youth in Politics, the East Africa Under 40 Political Leaders Forum, reinventing leadership for East African millennials. The summit facilitated a set of intergenerational conversations between young leaders, policymakers, and key national and regional political actors in order to solidify a common purpose, understanding, and solidarity between them. The Nairobi Summit Center played host for Day 1, and key sessions were held simultaneously via live telecasts between the EAC headquarters in Arusha, Nairobi, and Juba, providing for a unique hybrid experience. The highlight of the summit and Day 1 was the acceptance by His Excellency Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete, former President of the United Republic of Tanzania, to become the patron of YouLead. Key outcomes: launched the process of developing the East African Youth Governance Architecture Report and the East African Youth Manifesto, the East Africa We Want, broadcasted an intergenerational roundtable dialogue on the leadership for the East Africa We Want, and a roundtable conversation on the leadership for the East African Community We Want to inform the curriculum for the East African Emerging Leaders Fellowship Program. Day 1 also featured the Gender Equality Forum, young women mobilizing towards Goal 5 of Agenda 2030 and Aspiration 6 of Agenda 2063. Young and senior women gathered virtually and in Arusha for an intergenerational conversation on young women's participation in leadership towards realizing meaningful inclusion of young women in good governance and leadership, to tackle several questions which had been raised and co-created by young women in the region through the leadership of Plan International Kenya. And of course, the icing on the cake on Day 1 was the evening fireside chat with His Excellency Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete, who freely mingled with the young people and shared words of wisdom with the delegates. Day 2 was dedicated to the East African Youth Forum on Peace, Youth at the Center of Peace Building and Conflict Prevention. The forum was dedicated to providing an opportunity for youth to have their voice heard and strengthen their ability to engage in peace and security and contribute towards building an effective, well-coordinated coordinated and responsive youth sector that acts in solidarity within the region. The discussions focused on the vulnerability of youth in conflicts in the region and the role youth can play in peace building, ensuring sustainable security and stability in East Africa. The forum was led by the YouLead Consortium in South Sudan, with sessions at the EAC headquarters, Arusha, Juba, and virtually. The chief guest being Rebecca Garang, Vice President of the Republic of South Sudan. Key interventions proposed in the forum include consolidate an East Africa youth network for conflict prevention and peace building, capacity building for young peace builders on reconciliation, mediation, and arbitration, peer-to-peer roundtable conversation for experience sharing on the implementation of peace and conflict resolution mechanisms, peace building advocacy training for youth in the region, and capacity building for youth on implementation of UNSCR 2250. A series of high-value breakout sessions were also held in the afternoon, facilitated by a number of consortium members. Day 3 was dedicated to the East Africa Under 40 Business Leaders Forum, accelerating economic opportunities and decent work for youth, and the East African Youth Enterprise Awards. Introduced in November 2019, the forum has gained traction in the region, especially amongst young CEOs, entrepreneurs, and innovators. The 2020 forum, jointly hosted by Burundi and Rwanda, was composed of well-structured sets of sessions focusing on youth-specific policy and capacity issues, resulting in a set of outcomes that could be taken up by the EAC member states, development partners, and other actors. In addition, the YouLead program piloted its first ever East African Youth Enterprise Awards, recognizing youth-led businesses across the East African community, the partner states which in the current COVID-19 pandemic global context had managed to remain resilient and are simultaneously taking deliberate, innovative actions towards providing decent livelihoods and confronting the most pressing issues of our region, especially those affecting women and youth. Day 4 was dedicated to post-summit agenda development, as well as creating a strong alumni network, the YouLead Action Network, and the agenda of action based on the outcomes of the national level pre-summit events. This resulted in a common regional agenda for action and country-specific interventions. Day 5 was a follow-up of Day 2 and was dedicated to combating violent extremism and promoting safety online, resources for youth-led NGOs. The session was facilitated by Facebook, with panelists and participants joining both virtually and in Arusha, Tanzania. To all our lead partners for 2020, thank you for your continued commitment to YouLead ambitions. Your participation and support have enabled us to meet several of our goals for 2020. We look forward to continued success together with these collaborations as we pursue the post-summit agenda implementation.